do take Genesis chapter 1 and 2 literally. I just think it's not like there's a way of interpreting it literally, and there's a way of interpreting it extraordinarily literally, which is to say you're putting your own words into it that aren't necessarily there and assuming that that's an absolute fact, even when it doesn't make sense. And that's what they do when they say, like, for example, it says that God created man and woman out of dust. It doesn't have the word immediately in there, but in any case, it's the same principle, right? Like, there's physical matter that's part of what's in the Earth's basic core layer, and it's also like the fundamental four elements that we're made up of. So if you look at both of those together, you could essentially say that we're made of clay to some degree, and it's just more complex. And I'm talking about the molecules, not necessarily the
clay and people do not have the same composition.
Yeah, I mean, there's like oxygen, hydrogen. There's like four fundamental elements that we're basically made of, and so is clay.
No. Clay is pulverized rock, and rock is nearly 50% silica and 25% oxygen. So that's 75%, and then the next most, at least in the Earth's lithosphere, and clay is going to be representative of the lithosphere because it's just eroded rocks, right? So in order, it is silica, oxygen. I'm pretty sure the next two are aluminum and iron. You could have phosphorus in that third or fourth spot, perhaps. I mean, my memory's not perfect. I can look it up.
So just to clarify, I was referring to a different definition of that Hebrew word, which I think is more like dirt, and it does have carbon in it because it's it has carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. Those four basic elements.
Soil has those things in it because around half of soil is organic matter. So the biblical account cannot be that God took soil, which much of it is composed of organic matter, because he's creating life. Well, actually, does God create? I mean, you could spin it in a way, because I think actually it says that God created the plants and stuff before Adam. Doesn't it say that?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So if you wanted to spin that, I shouldn't have told you that. I should have kept that secret to keep the points on my side. But that would be the only way you could spin that. But that's just because, I mean, then it becomes, there's nothing really special about that, because what you're saying is living things are made of the stuff from living things. And there's nothing really like revelatory about that.
Well, I mean, that's still my point, though, is like, if we look at the fact that all living things are descended from the compounds that make up living things, that's at least compatible with one interpretation of Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, which is essentially that we came from that in an evolutionary process. So that was my only point. Like, if you look at one way of interpreting these ancient Hebrew words that's compatible with modern science, you could at least reconcile it. You obviously can't say this is definitely what the human authors meant, because they didn't know modern science. But if we're assuming that God was also a co-author of these two chapters, then God could have meant that.
So the problem there is you're interpreting the Bible in light of scientific facts that we know now, and then saying it validates known scientific facts. When if the Bible actually did contain revelatory information, then the Bible should be used to make new scientific discoveries, but that's never happened.
In fact, a lot of what the Bible states has been disproven. Like the Bible believes that it's a geocentric model instead of a heliocentric model in terms of the solar system. So like
that's not true.
Sorry, what?
Say again?
That's just not true. The Bible doesn't specifically say that.
All right.
Scientifically.
It says things that are impossible if Earth.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, what is this impossible thing that it says?
Where it says that God made the sun stop going down for an entire day. That's like in
Oh,
Jacob or
sure.
something like that, I think. That is impossible if the Earth orbits the sun.
Right, that's impossible according to nature, and that's the nature of a miracle, is that it suspends the laws of nature.
So then why believe it?
Okay,
Well,
so
because it's
there's
a
a few
miracle.
that
It's
specifically
not
say that
automatically
the
untrue
Earth.
because it's compatible with the laws of nature.
Hold on, we can't all three be talking. Say that again.
So what I was trying to say was, it's just because it's not possible according to nature doesn't mean that it's not possible according to the laws of miracles. And the laws of miracles are that God can suspend the laws of nature to make a miracle happen. So obviously
Right.
that
That's
one's
the
not
claim, but why
possible.
should I believe the claim?
Well, before the question of why should you believe it, at least it's plausible in itself. It's self-consistent. The idea that, like, this is separate
No, you
from
haven't
the
demonstrated that
heliocentric
it's
model.
plausible.
No, what I'm saying is this is separate from the heliocentric model. It doesn't necessarily prove that the sun revolves around the Earth just because God was able to do a miracle to stop the sun in its tracks, so to speak.
Right. We can come back to that, but my question was, why believe it? Just because the claim is consistent, uh, that doesn't mean that that's a reason to believe it.
Sure, that's a separate question, and that's a bigger topic to get into. But I was just trying to focus on this one topic of, like, does the Bible contain anti-scientific claims? And I just think that that's false to say that it does.
Okay.
So Genesis chapter 15 mentions that the Earth is that it is orbiting the sun. Many chapters in Numbers also mention the same thing as well, and also Revelations mentions that as well. So I'm not sure what else to say.
So you're saying that the Earth orbits the sun? Yeah, we know that.
No, but the Bible says that the sun orbits the Earth in those chapters.
Oh, well, you said it the other way around a second ago. Well, in any
My
case,
bad.
it's if it says that, I'm sure that it doesn't mean it scientifically, but it's talking about something else. But I don't know. What were the verses again? Because the Bible is never meant to be a scientific method.
Genesis chapter 15 and Genesis chapter 15 verses 12 through 17 mention it.
15, 12 to 17. Let me just take a quick
as
glance
well
at
as
this.
Numbers chapter 2 verse 3.
I mean, I just did a quick search. Psalm 93 says the world also is established that it cannot be moved.
Yeah, so I think when it says world, oftentimes it just means universe. And it's true that the universe can't be moved.
Why would the world mean the universe?
Oftentimes in the Bible, the phrase world in context clearly means all the things that God created, which includes everything.
But this would have been written by people that had no idea what the universe is.
Right, and so that comes back to the question of, well, how could the human authors have known this if there were only human authors and no divine authors? Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if there's a divine author, they could have known that.
Yeah, but it makes more sense that people that thought the sun orbits the Earth wrote a book that reflects it.
I gotta go.
That's fine. I gotta go soon too.
Yeah, I gotta go too in just a minute. But just to answer your question, like, I get what you're saying. Like, let me put it this way: you still have this logical contradiction stuck in your head that it's impossible for there to have been people who are human authors at that time to have the modern scientific understanding that we have now, which they clearly didn't have back then in history. And, like, it's not getting through to you that God could have potentially, if he co-authored this, he could have inspired them to use phrases that they didn't understand it and how we understand it now. But God understood it how we understand it now. Or rather, he understood it even better. Because, for example, when it says the world, he knew that it meant the universe, even though they didn't know that at the time.
Well, then why? Yeah, but again, why believe that claim?
Well, it's not like, about why. Is it plausible?
What's really weird here is, like, you're saying the fact that it says things that aren't true is evidence that God did it. And that's so wild to me.
No, no, I'm
Like,
just
well, the
saying
fact that it
the
says
fact
things
that
that
they're
aren't true proves it, because all that does is prove that God was speaking to them in terms they could understand.
all I'm trying to say is if it's compatible with modern science and modern understanding of everything, then it's at least plausible. And if it's plausible, then you can research the question, why should I believe it, which is your other question. And that's a separate thing to go down. But at the very least, I think it's safe to say it is plausible because these verses are compatible with our modern understanding of things.
There, but but are they? You're
Yeah.
interpreting them in light of a modern understanding, and not looking at the word, not letting the words stand on their own. You're not letting the words mean what they literally say. You're letting them mean whatever they need to say to conform with the evidence.
Well, so you have a fundamental misunderstanding of how to apply an interpretation of anything. You have to take the interpretation wholesale and say, does this answer
Oh,
all of my
thank you.
objections satisfiably?
What?
Like, okay, well, first of all, there's a little bit of a lag, so there's like a 3-second lag. But what I said was, you have to take your interpretation and say, well, I'm going to test this interpretation against this objection, this objection, this objection that I personally have. Does this interpretation have a good answer for objection A, objection B, and objection C? Because these are my fundamental ones that if the interpretation doesn't have a good answer, I'm going to throw away the interpretation altogether. And that's what you have to do here. And with this interpretation that I'm giving right now of the Bible to you, you have to look at it with the understanding that God inherently is co-authoring these books. And from that perspective, if it's true, then you have to take that answer of God knew the science that we now know the modern day people know, and that the ancient humans who
But
co-authored it didn't know.
but that's not even remotely close to what the words say, because again, you're not reading the words literally. You are making the words somehow metaphorically mean what we know is actually true today.
Well, no, so that's actually the nature of language. We always start out literal, and then we become more abstract over time. Like, even the word abstract used to be a very literal word, meaning to draw out, like physically pull something out. And so that's the same thing with all these words that you're saying, well, we can't take them abstractly, we have to take them literally. So if you look at the word world in the Old Testament, and you say, okay, clearly means the world, and it can't mean the universe, well, why? Why can't it possibly mean the universe? Because if it could
Because they didn't
potentially
know
mean
the
the
universe existed.
they knew that there was the earth and the heavens, and they could call all those together the world. So then why not say that that's the exact same thing as
That's like what? That's like a group of people that live on an island, a tiny island like Easter Island, saying this island is all humanity, and then claiming that that's true because, well, they live on Earth, and so it includes all of Earth. Like, no, their scope is actually incredibly ignorant, and the reason they said the things they said was because of their ignorance. And now you're just applying modern knowledge to what they were saying, and 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 asserting that yes, they were wrong, but what was really happening was they were being divinely revealed true information about something that they don't even know, but it was done in a way to be spoken and written about only in terms that they knew, giving them absolutely no new knowledge of anything, and just going with what they have forever. And then later, science, not the Bible, makes these discoveries.
well, so I get what you're saying, but the problem is that's in the examples that we're talking about, that's not what's actually happening here. What we see happening is that they are actually literal, but they're just in a very, very limited scope, like the same phrase that you used earlier. For example, if you look at the everything around you and you
Then
look up
it's
at the sky, that is essentially the basics of the universe,
no, it's not even
right?
close.
Yeah, you have
There's
here and
probably there's
everywhere
like
else.
400 billion galaxies. When you look up at the night sky, you can see around 5,000 stars. Well, not from any one location. In any one location, you can only see a few hundred stars, maybe close to a
Well,
thousand.
first of all, I mean, they could see a lot more back then, right?
Uh, not that much more. This number I'm giving you is not what somebody in standing at Times Square with lots of light pollution sees.
Sure, no, it's fair. But like still, it doesn't even matter how many. The point is if you can see the two concepts here and everywhere else, then you have the entirety of the universe conceptually in your mind.
I have
They just
no
call
idea
it the world.
what that I have no idea what that means. If I lived on an island and a tiny island and I said this is the entire world, that would literally be wrong. There'd be no way to say, well, yeah, but I mean, you're on the island, which is part of the world, so it is correct. It's like no, the world is so much more than that island.
You're right, but the concept, the basic abstract concept still remains intact and full. Like, this is the entirety of the place that people are. Even if our concept of people is limited to the people I know. Okay, you're missing my point. Like, you're looking at this as if it has to be a scientific textbook. And that's just not how anything works except scientific textbooks.
It doesn't have to be science to be right or wrong. You know, like when Jesus said the mustard seed is the smallest seed, that's literally wrong. If he was God, he would have told us what the smallest seed is, and people would have learned something new. In fact, the argument that people give is, well, the Bible says Earth hangs in space and is supported by nothing and blah, 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 blah. And people back then couldn't have really known or understood that, although by looking at the moon, they could have guessed Earth is like that. But people use that as an example of that demonstrates that the words must have been like divinely inspired, because people back then couldn't have known that, but God would obviously know all things. But then again, Jesus says things that aren't true, like the mustard seed is the smallest seed. There's also this verse where he talks about in the days of David, or in the time of David, when so and so was the high priest, they took grain from the reserves, and that is not who the high priest was. It was a completely different person. So there's more than one account of Jesus saying something that's literally not true.
Great. This is a really good example, actually, the one that you said, the high priest one, of the way that you're thinking is fundamentally wrong. Because when he's talking to these people, first of all, Jesus didn't write the book. So what he did was he spoke to these people, and in the context of the people he was speaking to, this was essentially the same as a chapter heading.
He said something is not true.
Well, hold on a
second. Do you take the position of biblical inerrancy? That's really important.
So the part of the reason I'm asking, hold on a second, is just because there's a lag and I don't know exactly like how long it is, and it's making this difficult. And no, I do say that there's no errors in the Bible. Yes, I do say that there's none.
Okay, so when Jesus said something that is, we have two accounts of him saying something factually incorrect.
So the first one that I wanted to address was this one of saying, in the days of this high priest. Well, first of all, he's not saying that was literally at the time that this event happened. He's essentially referring to a chapter heading in their scrolls. In this part of your scrolls, where it starts off with this person being the high priest, during that chapter of your scrolls, this event happened. This is what he's talking about. And this is something they would have understood back then, which is why nobody, for hundreds of years who were studying Jesus' words, questioned
evidence do you have of that?
I don't personally have the evidence with me, but there's evidence that that's what they used when they had their scrolls. Like, I don't have an account of it right now. I think one of my books does, but I haven't read it in like 10 years. But that's the argument that I'm... And also in the same book, the other argument was the seed one. That was of all the seeds that they had in that area, the people he was talking to, the smallest one they had was the mustard seed. He's not talking a scientific textbook of all humans on Earth. He's talking to a specific small group of people in a specific area of the Mediterranean. And of course, like from those contexts that you're missing when you take these objections, like, yes, these are true. What do you mean?
It's still a lie to say the mustard seed is the smallest seed when apparently Jesus was God, so he would have known that that's not the case. It's still a lie to say it. You can
Okay,
say he had a reason to lie, but it's still a lie.
there's a specific kind of person, I'm trying to think of the best example I can give, who isn't able to think in the natural way. And they make sitcoms about them, like Big Bang Theory. It's like, this isn't what the people who heard him would have interpreted it as being. This isn't how they would have interpreted his words, as some sort of a scientific fact that they need to say, well, okay, this must actually be the smallest seed ever on Earth known to any human. They literally were talking about, or they knew he was talking about seeds that they had or had seen, which was in their possession. Yeah, it would have been the mustard seed.
Again, still a lie. I didn't ask you about, I'm not talking about the people
It's
he was
not a
talking
lie.
to. I'm talking about what he said. No, yes, it's a lie because it's literally not true. And Jesus would have known that it's not true if he's God. So it's a lie. Just because you have a reason to say something that isn't true doesn't mean you're not lying. Tell me what it means to lie.
It's not a lie.
To me, if you lie,
So
it
lying
means you
is
say something that you know isn't true. That's the only definition of a lie that I think could possibly make any sense.
Yes, I agree with your definition of lie, but the truth always contains context, right?
So Jesus knew the mustard seed wasn't the smallest seed, so he lied. It doesn't matter if he said it because they didn't know that orchid seeds exist. It's still a lie. This live stream I'm supposed to do starts in less than 30 seconds. So you gotta make your final point. Sorry.
You're not able to read between the lines. That's my final point.
Did he lie?
No, he didn't lie.
Did he say something that he knew wasn't true?
No.
Yes, okay, then, so, what do you mean? He knew that the mustard seed wasn't the smallest seed. He's God.
We'll talk about this later. You gotta start your live stream.
Okay, so he knowingly said something that he knows isn't true. That's a lie. All right. And that's a wrap.